We're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Overcoming Podcast. I'm Derrick.
I'm Louise.
I'm Christian Brown.
So, Professor Brown, let me read a little bit of your bio. Christian Brown is a faculty advisor of Telemark's newspaper and the head of the journalism program at Cerritos College. He currently serves as department chair for the mass communication department. In 2009, you joined the Downey newspaper, right?
Yeah, Downey Patriot. Yeah.
The Downey Patriot. And you won a couple awards in 2014. That's I think you told us about that in class before. You graduated from UCLA or USC?
USC, yeah.
USC.
Yeah,
Can you talk about that a little bit?
yeah, I was working, like you said, for the Downey Patriot newspaper around the time of the Great Recession, and yeah, I was interested in gaining a couple of more skills in multimedia because when I went to college, it was very print journalism based, and so I was like, I want to know how to do video and audio and all this cool digital stuff. So yeah, I applied in 2014 to get into the program. They created a one-year master program for USC Annenberg. And yeah, I did that and went, and it was wonderful. They had just built this brand new facility for journalism, a great lab that even folks from CNN came by and were jealous of what we had. And so,
I think about 2 years ago, we went on a tour of that same department, right?
That's right. Yeah, I took some of the Cerritos College folks over there to take a look at the facility.
So today's topic is we're talking about virtual teaching. So what do you think is the difference between teaching in class and teaching online, especially like with the newspaper?
Mm-hmm. It's been a lot. It's been a transition. Now I'll take a step back and give the large perspective first. That I think this has overall been very good for education. That we had to go through this. The internet, when it came on the scene, forced many industries to have to change and adapt everything that they do in order to essentially make their products more equitable. If you think about it, movies, right, had to reckon with what do we do now that the internet's here. Music had to figure out what to do now that people could stream their stuff. Napster came about, right, and folks had to realize we need to do music differently. And education had largely been able to stay away from that and just, engage with the internet as we saw fit. So we saw a couple of online classes and online schools here and there, but it was definitely the exception and not the rule. And so by us being forced by the pandemic to figure out how can we use the internet for education, I feel like it's opened up a lot of opportunities for much more equitable access for the students. I think I'm already been thinking about once we go back to campus, what are some ways that we can make education more flexible, right? Like, what would it look like to say to students, you don't have to come to class every class session if you have a job and you need to be at your job? Just look at the online lecture version, and then when you can make it to class, then come to class, right?
Yeah.
Like, how would that totally change how we do education and create this hybrid for every class? And so that's the large view. But for Talent Marks specifically, it was a lot of work at the beginning to figure out how do we do this, right? What does this look like? The newsroom of any media outlet is just like the hub of the family, like the news family coming together and bouncing ideas off of each other, and synergy that happens when you're together. And you're not able to do that entirely online. So that's the portion I think that's the most missing, is how do you recreate that aspect. And yeah, we have to use a lot of Zoom, a lot of texting and and emails.
So, Professor Brown,
Yeah.
I I went over last year in class what motivated me to get into this field. The bombing of the naval ship, the USS Cole. What inspired you to come down this path?
Yeah, great question. And I remember the bombing that took place then, and when we really started to realize that terrorism was here. In any case, for me, it was middle school. I really was into politics. I loved the U.S. history class that I took and learning about the history of this country, and it coincided with the 2000 election. So the 2000 election was happening, and everybody was so excited about 2000. Those who are older remember Y2K. Uh, so everyone was freaking out, and oh my gosh, we're moving into the 21st century. Like, it was such just a big moment in history, and yeah, I was given an assignment by my teacher, my history teacher, and her name was Mrs. English, and she gave us an assignment to. She gave us a blank map of the United States and said, "Okay, everyone, take this home and watch the election coverage. So when they call the state blue for Al Gore, color in the map the state blue, and when it's red, color it in for George Bush, red." And so by the end of the night, Florida was purple.
Mm.
All the students came the next day with this purple Florida, because at first they colored it blue and then they colored it red. They were like, well, how do we get the state right? And
Right.
by staying up so late, because the election coverage went much longer than everyone expected, and it ended up dragging out for weeks, of course, my exposure to political journalists began to happen as I watched them on TV and read them in the LA Times talking about politics and the ramifications of everything. And that really inspired me. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to be one of those political journalists that covers what's going on, because it just seems so important for history and for the present.
Well, so on election night, were you this past election night? Were you like hooked onto the TV watching it, or?
Unfortunately, yes. I've tried so hard to unplug from politics the last year of the Trump administration, because it's just been so insane. Um, and But yeah, I was just so tense on election week, I guess. And I woke up that morning, the Saturday that Joe Biden was what they called it for Joe Biden, and I just remember I was in my bed. I just woken up. I was physically tired. I was emotionally tired. It was raining. I don't know if y'all remember. It was raining
Yeah,
that morning,
yeah.
and so I had opened my blinds and was looking out of the window and heard the rain and stuff. And yeah, I won't forget Wolf Blitzer saying we have an election alert. and uh, and yeah, so I covered that whole week. CNN, all the networks stayed on, even in the 2020 election. I couldn't get any peace until I knew who had won.
Regarding this current election,
Mm.
well, the one that just ended, the 2020, what did, how did you feel as the days went by? Were you gaining confidence little by little, or Yeah, how were you feeling as the days went on?
Yeah, I on election night, I was like, I cannot be alone in this house on election night. I'm sorry. So I'm like, I had a couple of friends I've been seeing through the pandemic on a regular basis, and so I have my own little NBA bubble of people around me. But so I went to my friend Michael's house, um, and so I was feeling pretty confident going into the election that Joe Biden was going to win. But that was what my tea leaves were telling me. Uh, um, but I went over there, and because of the wacky way that the voting worked, because of the in-person voting being counted first, and then the mail-in ballots being counted last, yeah, that election night was bleak. It looked like the Democrats were going to lose, and so I remember us watching CNN that night, and at one point in Virginia looked like it was red for some reason, and everyone was freaking out. My friend was like, "You want some wings? Yeah, let's get Wingstop. We need Wingstop. Like, you want some ice cream too? Yeah, ice cream." We're like, we're gonna eat any unhealthy junk item we can put our hands on. So it was a very emotional election night. But the following morning, once it looked like Michigan had swung blue and Wisconsin had swung blue, I started to feel better and more confident. But yeah, it was a roller coaster.
Yeah. Um, what would you tell like somebody like now who wants to get into journalism and has to take an online class?
Wow. hmm Well, as far as journalism itself, we need journalism, good journalism now more than ever. This is the time. Uh,
Mhm.
all of these multitude of crises that are all happening at the same time: race relations, the economy, the health of the nation, the pandemic, just all of the corruption that we're going to have to clean up in America, uh,
Mhm.
the international relationships of the U.S. There's so much to cover. So it's a good time to get into this field if you really want to get your hands on a story. But it can be challenging trying to, especially for those who are brand new, to jump into a newsroom setting and learn the tricks of the trade um, in an online way. It can be challenging for some. So my advice would be to know your own strengths, right? Know your own weaknesses. I've been trying to convince a couple of students of that. And help them to say, like, if you know time management is an issue for you, you got to work on it, because it's when you work on online, it's really kind of self-paced and self-guided to a certain extent. So you have to work on some of that stuff, or it's going to be harder to succeed. And so well, it's just about knowing someone's self, making sure that they're ready to work. It is going to take much more grit and persistence if you're going to do it online. But all the skill sets are there. All the professors I know, even at the other community colleges at the Cal State level, are all dedicated to teaching still. And I think some of the Cal States are cheating too. They still on campus. But anyway, so depending on where you go, you might be able to get on campus. But no, this is a great time, I think, to get into the profession.
So we now are in our third semester dealing with the online only aspect. What have you learned along the way from the first to now? And how are you applying it to teaching?
Yeah, I think one thing I'll mention just broadly is that I've learned is just how resilient young people are and our students have been. I know I'm saying young people, but but my students. Our best student in the class right now in Talon Marks is, I think she won't mind me saying this. She's over 50 years old, and she came back to school. And her name is Jackie Cochran. Y'all remember that name, Jackie Cochran, because she's been doing excellent work. But in any case, just how resilient the students have been, I think.
I might have you send me her info so we can get in contact with her.
Yes, no, she did a podcast last semester, dating over the age of 50. It was a hit. It was a hit.
Oh, that's her?
Yeah, that's her that did that
Okay.
podcast. So yeah, you all should definitely talk to her. She's wonderful. But yeah, just how resilient the students have been. I think among the faculty and teachers everywhere, there was a concern that, oh, are the students going to be able to do this? And will they still learn? And will they still apply themselves? And at least from my end, I've still seen a lot of effort from students, and even seen students get more, some students get more engaged in this type of learning. And so, kind of like I mentioned at the top, I think we all have to have conversations in education about how do we teach, and maybe the brick and mortar way is not necessarily the best for everybody, and how can we have more avenues for students to succeed in college, and even through K through 12s. But yeah, I think that I've learned to be more disciplined myself. I think that this is something that most people who are working from home are starting to realize, that that the way our work schedules were set up before the pandemic weren't always necessarily conducive for more work the way that they were set up. For example, now that the pandemic is here and I'm working from home, I do a lot of stuff at night. And I actually feel like I do better now working at night doing my work than I did when I did it in the daytime, because I'm just a night person. And so I feel like I've actually become more productive, because while I had to do stuff in the daytime sitting at Cerritos College, and that wasn't really the time I would be most productive, now that I can work at home. Like literally last night, I was up until 12 midnight giving feedback to everybody, sending things out, emails out, which I'm sure they'll be like, why is Brown sending me stuff at midnight? But I feel like I'm really productive at that time. So I think I've learned that about myself, and my friends and I are having conversations about, do we have to go to work Monday through Friday? Do we have to go in at certain, how can the schedule look different? But yeah, I think my main point is just that I think the students strive and do better when we just embrace digital even more than we have, because the students these days are digital anyway. With everything else that they do, it's time that we use this to teach them too.
Are you still getting your steps in?
Now that I failed, I have failed. Where's my? I don't even know where my Fitbit is. That's a shame. I think it was around here somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I have failed it.
Same here.
Yeah.
Here's one question. I know that you know how we had our editors meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is something that you will tell that you told your editors different from now, maybe like from a year ago?
Oh wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I noticed with Alicia Edquest, who's the lab tech over at Cerritos College in the journalism program, is that because the students aren't on campus, the newspaper students, the campus news has become kind of out of sight, out of mind, because they're not on the physical campus anymore. So it becomes more difficult to be engaged with campus news sometimes. And so one thing I had them do at the beginning of this semester is I actually laid out for them, okay, this is what the policy manual actually says about your role as an editor.
Mhm.
and start thinking about who needs to know who you are on the campus.
Mhm.
Um, because covering any beat, this is something that folks should know that you need to. It's not about what you know, but it's about who knows you.
Yeah.
Right.
Because when news breaks, you want people to think of you as the journalist, like, oh, let me contact Christian because they work for La La La. Which is why the Washington Post and New York Times gets all these tips because they know who the beat reporters are. So I did have them this semester, unlike the past, send out an email, a welcome kind of introductory email to all of the heads on campus.
Okay.
So I had them send emails to Fierro's, who's the president, Dr. Fierro, the president of Cerritos College, sent emails to the VPs on campus and the chief of police to basically
Mhm.
say, like, I want to introduce myself. You may not see my face, but you need to know who I am. And so I think that has been one of the things I've been teaching is how to report during a crisis, and how when you have this distance and this space to still try to cultivate your sources when you can't see people. Um, so yeah, that's different. And then also I've been just telling the editors about how to lead in the newsroom when they have new staff coming in. We had 13 new people come in this semester. So we have a big staff now, y'all. It's big.
Who's
So,
your EIC?
Sean Davis is the
What?
editor. Yeah,
Congrats.
Sean Davis he's at the helm. So reach out to him. It's
Actually, he's part of our list of people that we want to interview.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's now the president also of JACC, the student president.
Oh man.
So yeah, he's coming on up. He's
Big
got
move.
a lot of responsibilities this semester that he's doing. So yeah,
So, is JACC still going on, or?
they are. So yeah, the JACC, the Journalism Association of Community Colleges, um, typically would meet every semester. Usually in the fall, they would have like a local regional contest and conference, and then in the spring, have a joint one between the Northern California branch and the Southern California branch. Um, Last semester, we did a digital conference, but they combined everybody together, uh, both regions together. And it actually worked out pretty well. We had about 6 students go to it. But essentially, it was we had workshops like usual. They used a particular app that I can't remember the name of, but it essentially allowed you to hop between different Zoom rooms,
Oh, nice.
a student lounge and a teacher lounge, and you could kind of hop around and talk to people, and yeah, great speakers. So we're doing the same thing this year in March. They're going to have a larger one with a lot of different journalism associations coming together, and JBC is going to attend that one. And so yeah, we're going to hopefully take some students to that too. So.
Do they have any podcast stuff yet, or
Oh man, do you mean the students?
the JACC?
Oh, okay. Like a workshop on it, you mean?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if they had one. I don't want to be a liar here. I'm not sure if they did have one at the last conference. So if they're listening, y'all did. I'm sorry. I didn't attend that one if you had it. But yeah, I know that they've done some audio stuff in the past. They
Right.
definitely will have it at the larger conference in March.
Nice.
So, Professor, January 6th of this year, what were you thinking when you saw what you did on the TV screen as people jump fences to get inside and storm the Capitol?
I was thinking about this yesterday. I don't know if people remember Pastor Jeremiah Wright.
Mhm.
Pastor Jeremiah Wright was President Barack Obama's pastor.
Yeah.
Um, uh, when he first ran for president. There was a huge controversy because they dug up some of Jeremiah Wright's sermons that he had preached. And I remember the media was going crazy, the mainstream media, because he had one particular sermon where he essentially talked about how, the chickens were going to come home to roost in the U.S. because of all the stuff we've done and meddling with other people's countries and other people's democracies, and that eventually that was going to come back and hit us. And he said something like, "God damn America," and that was the controversial aspect of his sermon that people did not like. But he was essentially saying that, based on the Bible, countries that did some of the things that America did, that there was a punishment that happened, or there was some type of repercussion for that. And so I thought about that when America has done some of this insurrectionary things in other countries, and now it's happening in our own capital. That we shouldn't be so surprised, especially after Donald Trump has been pouring fuel on this fire of white nationalism, white grievance. Has been pouring fire on that, and then just simply trying to claim that he won the election when we all know that's not true. And so the pragmatic side of me was like, well, this is to be expected because of just, after you gas people up, there's no option but it to become violent. But it was also just very sad to watch that this is what is happening in our country after years of peaceful transitions of power. Now end up in this place where we have to have 25,000 National Guard troops, some sleeping inside of the Capitol. We haven't seen that since the Civil War.
I was just looking at those photos and I was like, wow. Senators walking over National Guard sleeping on the ground.
Yeah, like it's, this is what happens in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places. So, but the last thing I'll say is, just as a Black man, seeing how easily the insurrectionists and the rioters stormed the Capitol with not many, National Guard there, police there, knowing that in the summer of last year, when the Black Lives Matter protesters came through, that they were well prepared, unnecessarily so, for some type of insurrection to happen. And and Joe Biden said it himself, that we all know that if it was Black Lives Matter protesters storming the Capitol, that it would have gone another way. So so I just hope that this is a moment for America to really look at our demons. We say it all the time, every time something like this happens, but I just hope that this is one moment where, especially white America, will take the time to say, you know what, let's not wait for people of color to tell us when we're wrong. We need to realize that some of this stuff is happening and we need to shut it down, because we're becoming a multicultural democracy now, and we have to embrace it. We can't keep pushing back against it. The change is here. The change is here.
What would you tell a journalist that was covering that story?
Wow. And there was some phenomenal reporting that was done on oh, wow. That is one thing. I'm a little envious of the people, the journalists who were able to be in the crowd. I know CNN, there was a reporter that did some phenomenal work. The New Yorker footage just over the weekend. They were right in there with the protest, or with the rioters. Let me not call them. So yeah, I have a list of advice I always give students if they're going to cover protests. But yeah, you have to kind of blend in with the protests if you're there. And not try to stand out too much, which is probably why people were able to get such good footage that they got, because they were just kind of in the midst of the crowd. but yeah, obviously being safe, obviously making sure that you still are identifiable as part of the press, still, and yeah, knowing how to obey the police orders, even if you're journalists, you still have to obey when the police tell you that you need to, and always being prepared if you cover a protest, having a backpack, having water, having a snack. You never know how long you're going to be there. Making sure that if it gets too dangerous, sometimes it's good to have a towel, have something to clean, cover your eyes, some type of eye covering when you're covering protest. But if you're in the midst of a protest, you never want to go alone either. So a team is two are better than one in that context. But yeah, just capturing the essence of what's going on. What are the people saying? What are they feeling in that moment? And making sure that that's all captured. And yeah, those journalists did that. It's so important because the stuff that they're getting now, the police, the FBI, the Secret Service can now use the journalist content when they're
I
persecuting.
think that's how they got the lady that was selling Nancy Pelosi's laptop.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's how they
Yeah. There was some footage of her
Mhm.
her bag. She was, she was running off. So, uh,
I just one more question, then we'll and I ask this to every person that we interview. What is one of your favorite quotes?
oh wow, favorite quote. Oh, there's so many of them. Oh man. Hmm. My goodness. I was gonna say I'm trying to think of something I've been thinking of lately. Hmm. Well, this is a biblical one, but it is one that I've been thinking of a lot lately. I'm the son of two Pentecostal preachers, so so
Okay.
so I'll always have a Bible quote to pull from. But I was just thinking about Micah. Um, in the book of Micah, Micah the prophet is trying to encourage the people to do what is right, and in the midst of so much evil that's going on. And he asked a question and said, "What is it that the Lord has required of you, but to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before your God?" And it's such a simple. It seems like a simple request. Like if there is a God, right? The only thing that they are asking of you is to be just, right? Is to be a merciful person to yourself and to other people, and to be a humble person. And it seems so simple, but in the time and the era that we live in, we've seen just such the opposite of that, and on both sides of the political spectrum, right? I often challenge my liberal, woke, hippie friends uh, not to be so merciless with the other side and realize that, there needs to be still mercy, and the ability for people to grow, and to not assume that people can no longer grow, but to give them a chance to. So yeah, maybe it's not a super contemporary quote. It's an old one, but that is one I've been ruminating on lately.
Luis, you have the last word.
Yeah. Well, I know that tomorrow is the inauguration.
Yeah.
I know that on the 21st, Jefferson Davis, back in 1861, began seceding
Mm,
from the country. So, do you see history repeating itself?
well, if I had a crystal ball, maybe I'd. But I hope not. I hope not. Uh, I am worried because of the power of the press. We saw this at the end of the 1800s with the Spanish American War, that the press kind of like drummed up, let's go to war with Spain, let's go to war with Spain. And it moved the people and eventually moved President McKinley to like start a war, even when they really didn't need to go into a war.
Right.
So I am worried that when I watch the news outlets these days, you can't get through too many segments without somebody saying, "Well, it might be a civil war. I don't know." So it's like, can y'all dial that down, please? So I really hope not. I really hope not. I think it's a lot's going to depend on the new incoming president, Joe Biden, and what type of temperature he sets, and whether or not he's able to, lower the temperature and try to work across the aisle with Republicans to get some things done. A couple of people have said it, but I think economic relief usually will bring an end to some of these tensions. Because when people are poor, when people don't have health care,
Right.
and people don't have economic stability, it just gives them more reason to, to tear down, the government that we have, or to lend themselves to some type of anarchy. So I don't know. I'm hopeful that there's not, but I heard a presidential historian, say that this decade of the 20s is going to be probably the most volatile uh, we've seen since the 1850s, where it just was this real stressful time that it can go that way depending on how this decade goes. So yeah, I don't want to see a civil war of 2030, but we gotta make sure that we get through this decade all right.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, fingers crossed. Good
Yeah.
vibes, prayers, cast the spells, whatever,
Yes.
whatever you need to do.
Thank you so much for coming on our podcast, Professor
Thank
Brown.
you.
Thank you for inviting me. This was really fun. It's good to see you too.
Good to see you.
Looking great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Um,
Likewise.
Thank you.
yeah. This has been the Overcoming Podcast. I'm Derrick.
I'm Luis.
And I'm Christian.
We'll see you guys next time. Thank you. Let me. Ooh.